and Carolyn, a big thank you to both of you. And also a thanks to and a shout out to the last webinar that you held with Alyssa Ancliffe, who was talking about the world of reviews and how important that is. If you haven't listened to that particular one, I know you guys have recorded that, go back and listen to it. It was fabulous. I tuned in and went, oh my goodness, that's another part of what I do. I actually do review management services also, and she was bang on. So there's a lot to be learned from that. So I just wanted to give that shout out to start out with.
Good
but
stuff,
a little bit
Doc.
yeah, we love that, don't we, eh? Because it was really great. A little bit about myself. I wasn't always a photographer. My background is actually far broader than that. Actually, I only got into publishing virtual tours about 2 years ago. My background is actually more retail and sales training. I've been in management. I've done tourism marketing. So I've done a lot of different things. And I moved to Australia back in 2008. And I actually had to somewhat reinvent myself and find ways to basically take all the skill sets I developed over the years in all kinds of different industries. And so I went into advertising of all things, and I spent a little time working with Yellow Pages, and then I went off to doing advertising in the tourism industry. And somehow I ended up having a friend of mine who is a Google AdWords specialist say to me, well, you're taking all these fabulous photos for these clients of yours in the tourism industry, why aren't you doing it for Google? And I had no idea this even existed at the time. And then but then again, I realized I did know about it, but I didn't realize that this is what it was. It was Google Street View. And so he put me in touch with Google so that I could actually sign up and become a Google trusted photographer. Lo and behold, after sending in a set of test images, they very quickly approved me. And since then, that's 2 years now, that's all I've been doing. It's the primary portion of my work. So that gives you a little bit of a background. I didn't start off as a photographer, so I actually come from more of a retail and a sales background. So understanding the whole idea of marketing is actually at the core of what it is that I actually provide. So this session, of course, everyone here is going to want to learn a little bit about what VR is, and we want to demystify the terminology of VR. A lot of people have very funny ideas about what VR is. How many times have I actually had someone tell me, can you create a 360 3D video thing? You know, they don't know what to call it. And so I want to just give you a basic definition of really what VR actually is. We're also going to be talking about how do you actually see this stuff. So I'm going to give you some demos of this. And also, really, where's your opportunity as a business to be able to sign up and get into the world of VR without breaking the bank? Because it doesn't have to be expensive. It can actually be relatively affordable and probably the biggest dip of your toe in this space that you could possibly make. So to start with, the word VR, virtual reality, is really what it is. It's actually an umbrella term. What it means is anything that you wear a headset with or that has a virtual aspect, a non-real aspect to it, is virtual reality. Technically speaking, a photoshopped picture could be classified as VR. So it's really an overarching terminology, okay? Where it really gets interesting for businesses, though, is when you start to think in terms of how do I augment, how do I add to this experience? And that's what augmented reality is all about. And I'll be touching on how you can actually do that very easily with virtual tours. The things that you can do in augmented reality is you can actually add with motion, touch, smell, sound. In fact, actually, just yesterday I was speaking with a fellow by the name of Pradeep Khanna, who's the managing director of a business in Sydney that specializes in AR, VR, and mixed reality. And he was in San Diego just last week, and he was learning how to use something called a haptic glove. And a haptic glove is something that you stick your hand in, and that actually you can actually play the piano and feel yourself touching the keys. That's the kind of stuff that VR can actually do. So that's where it's going. But is that accessible to you as a tour business? Probably not, and it probably doesn't need to be. And this is about not going down that path and getting real about it. And so what we have to think about then is if VR is all of these things, and it does include 3D, and it does include 360-degree video, and it has all of those things, what's the foundation of all that? You know, the foundation of a virtual reality environment is a 360-degree view. In other words, you're sitting inside the ball and able to look around and interact with that space. That's what it's about. And the easiest way to create that is through, of all things, virtual tours or 360 photos. And for a lot of people, they don't think in terms of really what does this mean in terms of like how is this created? And then they get these ideas about, oh, well, does this mean I actually have to have full 3D to make it truly immersive? And yeah, not really. You don't have to. Not that long ago, actually it's about a year now, a year ago, I went to a training session that the folks from YouTube put on down at the film school in Sydney. And we were able to test out the creation of 3D 360 video. Now, for those of you who are techies, you're going to like seeing this. Creating 3D 360 video requires 1.6 gigabytes every 6 seconds. That's outrageous. Anyone who's, especially in Australia, we all know what kind of problems we've got with the internet and NBN and slow internet speeds. If you actually had to try to show 3D 360 video on a slow connection, it would just simply fail. Because it's really, as you can probably see in the images here, it's actually 4K video for each eye to make it look good. That's outrageous. So how do you actually mitigate that? How do you get around that? How do you make this really accessible? Well, it's really simple. It's actually a matter of going into virtual tours because they're photos, they're still images. What I'm actually showing here, if you look on the right on that image, you'll notice that there's 2 photos of a bunch of little dots on the map. And that's actually an example of what a virtual tour looks like when it's actually been published. This particular one is a very recent client of mine, the Central Coast Motel. And they wanted to be able to augment their experience for their clients. They want to make themselves look better online. And they've been a past client of mine in the tourism industry. They asked me to come in and do a virtual tour for them. So what I've done is I've actually created a tour that includes the ability to walk through every kind of room that they have. You'll notice that in these images, I don't actually do every single room. There's no point in doing that. But what there is the ability to see a sample of each kind of room so that if someone was to book into this particular motel, they get a really, really realistic experience about how they can actually, what they would expect to see when they got there. One of the things that's particularly wonderful about virtual tours published on Google Maps and on Google Street View is that Google has made it very easy for photographers such as myself, the ones that are Google trusted photographers, to not only publish the content, but to also update it on a regular basis. So for example, let's say that the Central Coast Motel calls me back and says, you know what, we just renovated the family room. Can you come back because we changed all the linen, it doesn't look the same, can you please come in and reshoot that? Absolutely no problem. I can go back in and just simply reshoot that one room. We don't have to reshoot the whole tour, and we can republish just that section and just patch it in essentially into that virtual tour. So it makes it very easy for businesses to be able to maintain a very up-to-date experience for their viewers. The other thing that you can do with a virtual tour, and I'll be showing you some examples shortly, is how you can actually add additional content, such as buttons where you can actually click onto that'll pop up a video, or that will actually give you the ability to log into to their booking engine so that they can actually book right inside the virtual tour. That's called augmented reality because we're actually augmenting the experience by putting extra content on top of the photos, on top of the 360 photos. So that's really what virtual tours are. Okay, obviously one of the things that really is wonderful about the world of photography, especially in 360 world too, is that most people think of it as being far more realistic because it's not like an image, a flat standard photo where it's very easy to Photoshop. Photoshopping a 360 image to make it look prettier than it really is incredibly hard yards, incredibly hard work. So it tends not to be done, and therefore increases the level of authenticity in the experience for most viewers too. So for the organizations that really want to tell the truth, which is really the best way to actually attract new clients, it's an excellent way to be able to do that also. The other thing obviously is, like, you know, why would you want to actually get a virtual tour now is because really there's actually a surprisingly large community of photographers doing that. Right now, worldwide, last time I checked, there's about 7,000 photographers that are Google trusted. In Australia, there's probably about 120 to 150, roughly, the last time I checked. So there's a good-sized community of photographers that are capable of doing this across the whole of the country. In New Zealand, I know there's several there, too. I know we got people that are dialed in different parts of the world. And I don't think there's many parts of the world now that don't actually have virtual tour photographers, with the exception of in China, because Google does not operate in China, in case you didn't know. So where can virtual tours be seen? Well, the biggest virtual tour on the whole planet is Google Street View. So if you ever actually went, if you were looking at real estate, you were traveling around trying to figure out how to find somebody's address, trying to find a store, and you were using Google Maps, and then you zoomed in and used the Street View, the little orange guy on the map, or the little pegman on the map, that is actually the world's largest virtual tour and the largest virtual reality experience. And it's been here since the year 2012. That's when Google Street View first launched on that scale. Okay, so it's not something that's just brand spanking new. It's been around for a while. It's a tried and tested format. And what's really fascinating is how all of that has moved more towards the definition of VR, because people are now using headsets like the Google Cardboard or the Samsung Gear VR, if you've seen those, or the Oculus Rift. There's all these different headsets where you can see the virtual tours and VR experiences. So really, now there's a lot more ways of being able to see that content beyond just the flat standard desktop screen or mobile device. But those two, the desktop device and the mobile device, are still by far the most used places to see virtual tour photography. It's another organization that a lot of people don't realize is actually into the world of VR is Facebook. About a year and a half ago, they launched the ability for photographers to publish 360 photos. And they aren't at the point now where they're allowing virtual tours to be natively found inside of Google, inside of Facebook, but you can actually see 360 photos and you can see 360 videos now. So it's becoming very, very commonplace. The other place that you can actually see or get virtual tours be seen, and probably one of the most important places to have it published, is on your website. Simply because you do actually want to make sure that people are always returning back to your site. That should always be Grand Central Station for all of your own content anyway. There are also third-party platforms like Round the 360 Cities, SeatGeek. There's a lot of them out there. It's a huge industry that's growing in leaps and bounds. The projections right now are that we're going to be seeing virtual reality content creation doubling every 18 months, pretty well in the same way that technology doubles. So that gives you an idea how fast it's growing. So I thought probably the easiest way to really help you understand what virtual tours are like is to actually give you some real examples. So Bronwyn, if you can just make sure that you actually can see this when I click through. I want to make sure that people are able to see this. What I'm going to show you now is a custom virtual tour that I've built for the Gosford RSL here on the Central Coast. And this particular tour, I'm going to click on it now. It switches over. Just let me know to see whether or not you actually see the Gosford RSL homepage. Are you seeing that all right at your end? Good? Okay. So if you scroll down, you'll see that right inside their homepage is a virtual tour that's actually a Google Street View virtual tour with an enhancement layer on top of it. It's got a menu on it. The challenge with virtual tours for large spaces, whether it be a large motel, an RSL, it could be a large factory, whatever the case might be, a mall, is that navigating by using these little arrows, going around by a little arrow, would take you forever to get to see the whole place. And that's the only way that you can get around inside of Google Street View itself, natively on Google Maps. So what does this layer do is it allows you to navigate anywhere within the tour directly in a hurry. So you can go right to that one spot and be there immediately. So custom virtual tours are quite powerful in that way. And I'm just going to put this into full screen so it's a little easier for everyone to see the content. The other thing that a custom tour provides is the ability to put this into VR mode. Okay, so if I click on this, you're going to see the screen's going to change up. It's going to switch over to VR mode, and it's going to, you'll see now, as we move into the VR mode, it's going to take a little time for it to paint up. You can actually see these little balls. That is how you would navigate inside of a headset to go to a different place. Boom, notice I just moved into the choral room. Now if I want to move somewhere else, I'm going to go to the outdoor seating area. All right, and that's how your headset would allow you to be able to move around from one place to the other. And that's all based off of a Google Street View published virtual tour with an extra layer on top. That's all that is. So that gives you an idea of how powerful Google Street View's technology already is. All right? All this is a layer on top of Google Street View. Another thing that you can do with this is add hot links. For example, they wanted to have a hot link that says, hey, we want to be able to tell people what's actually happening in this hall. So if you want to see what that is, this takes them back into their Facebook page, and there you are. You actually can see all the events that are upcoming right there. So this is the kind of power that a custom virtual tour can provide. All right, so that's hopefully a good sample for you to see what that's like. Now, the other thing you might be noticing is how good the resolution is, how clear this is. It's because it's not video. If it was video, the quality would not be the same thing. Just to give you an idea of the difference between video versus photography, this image is actually a 72 megapixel image. And that's why it looks as good as it does. And you can do that at a very high speed and the ability to see it very clearly and very easily. If this were to be video, we'd still be waiting right now for it to load up, literally. So when I tell people, really, what should you be doing to get into the world of VR? Start with virtual tour photography. Let's make sure that the technology of 360 video is powerful enough for your clients to see before you go down that path. So that hopefully gives you a bit of an idea of what that's like. I'm just going to go back to the presentation again. The other thing that I can show you here is what does a 360 video look like. This is one that I actually created. This is on my everything I need is here. Fire burns, the waiting birds, the smoke it fills the room. The echo of your voice through the kitchen walls. Everything I need is here. Everything I need. I'm just going to pause it here. I think it might have been rather entertaining for you. This is a virtual tour that I had shot using the Google Street View methodology and converted it into a video, but it's based off of the photos, which is why it looks as good as it does. So this is another way of being able to create video in virtual tour world, in VR world, without it actually being very, very expensive. This is simply repurposing a virtual tour and creating new content out of it in 360. And it helps people guide through, and you'll notice that the quality of the imagery is still very, very good. Why? Because it's based off of photos. The challenge for this, by the way, folks, is that creating live video in 360 requires a huge amount of data. And really, the way I look at it is, if you're going to do that, you have to have a very, very high-end audience. And this over here is a 3D 360 video, where I'll show you what it looks like. I don't know if this is even going to work. We're going to see how far I can push the resolution. This is 8K, folks. I don't know if it's even going to work. Let's give it a go. I'm on a 1 gigabit internet connection, super high speed connection here. It's still loading. This is how slow this is. There I am in the video. It's still loading. So 360 video, is it here? Yeah. Does it work? Yeah, but if you're going to want decent quality, you're going to be waiting on. Why are virtual tours so important? Because unlike seeing, for example, that last video that was shot, that was trying to load, it was shot with this camera over here, the one on the left-hand side, and it's just a huge file. It's just going to take forever. So what I shoot with, it's a standard DSLR camera, a regular Canon camera, and that's why I can get the quality and resolution that I can get. If you wanted to give it a go yourself, a lot of people now are saying, well, can I do this myself? Well, absolutely yes. You actually can create it. But you know, unless you're actually trained in photography, you may end up wanting to try out one of these simple handheld one-shot cameras, like the one on the far right, which is a little Ricoh Theta. I own one of these. I do use it basically as a sampling tool or to show people the potential of the technology. But the quality, again, is going to be very, very limited. It's no different than, you know, taking a happy snap, if you wish, in 360. The resolution is about 1/4 or less than what you would get from a properly shot virtual tour. So, you know, the last thing you want to do is be showing off your business and it doesn't look good. You know, you want to be able to show it off in a high quality format. And that's really why, again, using proper DSLRs, proper camera, and hiring a proper photographer to actually do the job is probably your best bet. If you want to give it a go yourself, by all means, give it a try. You may enjoy it. It may be enough for you, but chances are you'll want to upgrade pretty quickly. But it's finding that sweet spot. Do you really want to go all the way to 3D? Probably not. Now, really, again, it's important to understand, like, why is this such an important thing, is because the world of Google My Business is probably the biggest white elephant problem we have right now in the world of marketing. And they are the largest hosting engine that you as a business can leverage to get your business to be found. And as of, I think it's actually about 3 weeks ago now, Google started to publish not only the virtual tour images, but also the view counts of how often each 360 image is being seen. This particular little snapshot on the side is the Nora Head Lighthouse quarters. I shot them a few months back, and they've already got something like about, I forgot, it's around 8,000 or 9,000 views that they've had of the images in their virtual tour. So we know that it works. But the problem is that the vast majority of businesses I talk to still have not either claimed their Google My Business page, haven't actually taken the time to get regular photos on there, haven't called to get a virtual tour. There's a lot of things they're not doing. So if there's one thing you really need to do is, before you can even have a virtual tour published on Google Street View for your business, is claim your Google My Business page. If you haven't done it yet, do it. And then click on that little hire a Google photographer at the top of your page, and it'll give you the ability to get in touch with virtual tour photographers in your area. That's one of the things that Google provides as a service. They will actually send me an email, for example, if you happen to be in the Central Coast, and say, hey, Mark, you know, there's someone who's interested. Why don't you give them a quote? Why don't you drop in and have a chat? Provide a site inspection. Now, one of the other things that I'm mentioning here in the slide is that the average number of photos that I've seen in the Central Coast for most businesses in the tourism industry was under 10, which is shocking. You know, the current maximum photo count you can put on your Google My Business page is about 200, and that's excluding the virtual tour. Really, folks, get in there and make sure you load up all the images you can and take advantage of the virtual tour photography, because it'll actually bolster up the amount of content that you're giving to Google, the world's largest search engine, so that you can actually be found. So that's a really important thing for you to actually help improve your listing on Google My Business. The other thing that actually happens with these images is that because they're actually 360 photos, and again, as I mentioned before, they're actually quite difficult to try to Photoshop or modify, is they're not stock photos. They can't be stock photos. It's the real thing. It's really your business. And it's usually reasonably up to date, because most people haven't been doing it for a long time. Something on the earliest virtual tours that have been shot for businesses is 2012, so it's still, relatively speaking, pretty recent. And you can get it updated as often as you choose or need. I've actually had some clients who I've done virtual tours for who probably won't need an update on the virtual tour for 3 to 5 years. You know, if they've just renovated the place, it looks the same, the menus for the restaurant doesn't change, they may not need it for a long period of time. And that's fine. It means that you've paid for a one-time cost for this photography, this digital asset, this virtual reality asset, that'll last you an incredibly long period of time. If you're not in that space where you need a regular update, well, that's fine too. You know, it depends on what your needs are. But again, very, very cost effective if you know that you can actually you can use this content for such a long period of time. Some of the Google stats that are important to be aware of about what do virtual tours actually do in terms of increasing users, increasing engagement. You know, 67% of viewers wanted more virtual tours back in 2014. My goodness, we're in 2017 now. The numbers haven't gone down, they've gone up. So it's really an area that is way underutilized when you consider how incredibly powerful it is. So what are we going to get as a result? We're going to get increased engagement. It's actually, I look at it as a premium listing content opportunity. I mentioned earlier on that I did work for Yellow Pages for a period of time. I actually look at the Google My Business now as being, especially with a virtual tour and a well-published Google My Business content page, the equivalent of saying, you know, a full-page ad in the Yellow Pages from 20 years ago. It really is that powerful. It's the most important single asset you've got online. It isn't the only one. It's very important that you also make sure that you get yourself listed on all the other map listings also, but it is the primary one you want to go to. And once you've actually got that virtual tour published on Google Maps, you can then reuse it on your website, as I've mentioned. You can reuse it inside of your Facebook page, and I'm about to share with you what that looks like. And with the YouTube content option, you can then start to add audio, as you probably would have heard with that sample of the Macron Music School. And where's this going next? Well, you can literally bring that on to virtual web shopping, virtual web bookings. So what happens is that if you do want to actually look, for example, let me just take you to Galaxy quickly. So if I actually just look up Galaxy Motel, and we go to their website, you'll actually see on their virtual tour that pops up. You can go right into the reception desk, and you can book online now, and that'll take you right into their booking engine. Pretty slick stuff. So this is the kind of power you've got built into a virtual tour nowadays. Going back over here, so that's the kind of interactive capabilities you've got, and virtual web shopping is essentially no different. So what has been the result of Google Street View's impact on businesses? Well, they're actually saying that it's basically doubling the interest in business listings. So should you do it? I think you probably should. I am a little bit biased, and here's your stats on where this all comes from. Now, there's another major factor that's actually taking place in the world of virtual reality, and that's that even Hollywood is getting involved. Everyone knows Steven Spielberg, right? Well, guess what? He's about to actually create a movie based off of a very popular book that was recommended to me by none other than Ken Duncan. Anyone who knows photography probably knows a little bit about Ken Duncan. Yeah, he's become a bit of a mate, and happens to be my next door neighbor, and he recommended that I read this book called Ready Player One about VR. And sure enough, Steven Spielberg is actually going to be launching a movie about this next year. If you didn't think VR was important, think of what happened when Spielberg put out E.T. or Jurassic Park. Think of what George Lucas did when he put out, those movies have a huge impact in terms of the interest in these types of ideas, concepts, and technologies. So we're going to be seeing an even larger increase in interest in the VR world. People are going to be wanting to actually see that content even more. So if you can be a participant in that space, by all means, this is your opportunity to do so. What I'm going to show you now, if I may, is I'm just going to bring this back to what does a virtual tour look like that's actually loaded on a Google My Business page. Sorry, not on a Facebook page. You'll notice over here that there's a virtual tour tab that's been added to Facebook. You can add that on so that you can reuse, as I was saying, the virtual tour right inside the same way that it was actually published on Google Maps and on your website. So this is one more way in which you can reuse it right inside of Facebook. Now, you can't create a feed with this directly on it, but you can link back to it. All right. So this is another way of being able to create that content, and another location where it can be found. For those of you who've got a little bit deeper pockets, for about 30, I think it's $30 US per month, you can actually make this tab available on mobile devices also. This is only available on desktop at this point in time. But that's exactly what virtual tours look like in this space. So here's, again, the same thing for Gosford RSL, using them as, and you'll see that it's the same kind of experience once again, where they can see it right inside their Facebook page, and they can move around, and you can see how simple it is to navigate and just move around inside that space. And you'll notice that also the other advantage, you notice that there's auto rotation. The image starts to move all on its own. Just one more way to make it look a little bit more alive and a little more interactive for people. One of the bigger questions I obviously get with the world of virtual tours is, how much does this all cost? Well, to give you an idea, you can get a virtual tour shot by a commercial photographer who's Google trusted for as little as about $300, $350. That's pretty well the starting point you're going to be seeing for a very tiny space. If, for example, if all you've got is a little tiny cafe, or let's say you're a little restaurant that's like an open space, you might be able to get in at about as little as that. And usually most commercial photographers will charge on a per image basis or per grouped image basis. The custom virtual tour layer, that will be an additional cost because there is a hosting cost for those things. Usually more recommended for the larger businesses where navigation is in a larger area. And for example, a place like the Gosford RSL, it is still under $3,000 to have shot and published. So that's a big space. They've got like 6 meeting rooms. They've got a kids area. They've got a restaurant. They got 2 outdoor spaces. All that for under $3,000, I still think is quite a bargain. So that gives you a bit of an idea in terms of the cost. Now, of course, pricing will be very different from each photographer. Every photographer out there will have their own pricing model, but there's a reasonable amount of competition and there's a reasonable amount of consistency in that. The only time that it's going to get really expensive, and I can give you an example of a quote I provided to a prospect of mine who decided, they ended up choosing the virtual tour. They just started off wanting to have a VR experience in video in 3D, and the quote was $80,000. And they thought, oh my goodness, this is a little bit crazy. I said, what if I told you I could do that for under $4,000 as a virtual tour? And it's like, oh, really? That's more affordable? When you're going from 80 to 4, it's a huge drop. So keep in mind that you can have access to this for a very, very affordable rate. And if you're looking to get in touch with a virtual tour photographer in your area, it's very simple. Just go on to Google and search out virtual tour photographers. In fact, actually, there's people that if you actually are looking to get a local photographer through Google Maps, if you've already got your Google My Business listing set up, on the top of the listing, you'll actually see the option to be able to click and request a quote from a virtual tour photographer right in there. So it's very easy to get access to it. So the message here, the recap is, VR, it's just an umbrella term. It's simply a way of encompassing all of the virtual spaces, the virtual ways of seeing content, whether it be video, whether it be a virtual tour, a 360 image all of its own, whether it has audio or not. That's all VR, all of it is. That even includes non-real spaces. It includes things such as 3D renderings. So that's still VR. So really, again, having access to all that stuff, the easiest way to do it is simply start with the basics. Start with Google Street View. It's the most accessible place for your business to get access to virtual reality. And I think that's pretty well everything I've got here for you. I don't know if there's any questions that people would like to ask. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Wow, that was absolutely amazing. I think I personally learned a huge amount from what you've just given us, Mark, so thank you so much.
Very well.
We do have quite a few questions. Everyone's typing in. It was fantastic, fabulous. So I think lots of us learnt, you know, that it is accessible and what it is. For us, from our perspective, from my perspective, I always knew, yep, we've got to do it. But to actually see how it's done and the nuts and bolts has really helped me a lot as well. So, no, it's quite amazing. So I'll go through the questions and just keep typing them in. Let's have a squiz here. Okay, we'll start from the top. We've got Nelson. Were the indoor photos taken by a special Google camera?
No. All of the photos that I shoot, I actually shoot with Canon cameras and a fisheye lens. And the way that these photos are actually captured is by taking a series of photos and stitching them together, actually connecting them up so that they actually turn around on themselves, literally. They become a full 360-degree sphere. Really, it's Canon cameras and fisheye lenses is how it's done. That's the vast majority of what most virtual tour photographers use today. That's not to say that you can't use one-shot cameras. One-shot cameras are getting better, but the really good ones are really expensive. I was just shopping for looking at them last week to see what's new in this space, and there's a company called Aura, and they've got one that's about $30,000 for the camera that they just come out, and it shoots pretty close to the same as what I get with a regular Canon DSLR in one shot. But you know what? There's actually a problem with that, because when you're actually shooting a single image, you're actually not able to control the environment and field of view as easily. For example, if somebody's walking by, I can just wait to take the photo and then stitch the next image next to it so that basically we got nobody in it. Or if you want people to be in it, you can tell them to please get in the image and stay here while I take this photo. So you can actually control what will actually show up in a 360 photo better by shooting it in frames as opposed in a one-shot camera. The one-shot camera is really driven towards the videography side of things. But then you're getting into a lot more complex post-production. So I hope that answers the question.
Great. Sure did. Okay, so do you have, this one's from Craig, do you have any advice on how to use VR content at a trade show for a VR activation?
One of the most powerful ways to do that, it depends on what industry Craig is in. I don't know if maybe, Craig, I don't know if you don't mind sharing what industry you're thinking about, because it'll probably vary how I would answer that question.
Do you want to let us know, Craig? LA Tourism. He's a tourism board.
Okay, tourism board. Okay. For a tourism board, I would tend to think if you can find some of your existing clients who might already have a virtual tour shot, getting what's called a custom layer created, like these custom virtual tours, where you join up several of the different organizations in one custom layer. That can be produced by most reasonably well-trained, trusted photographers. What you can then do is actually bring along a Google Cardboard or a similar type of headset and allow people to be able to see the content in that way. That's really the best recommendation I can have, is because Google Cardboard is very inexpensive. You can order yourself in, half a dozen of these. They're like, I've actually seen them for as little as about $6 or $7 online, literally. So buy yourself a bunch of Google Cardboards. Make sure that you've got enough people with mobile phones that will actually work with it, handy, because you do need that too, okay, because that is what the actual content will show up on. That would be one thing. The other thing is quite simply, have a virtual tour that's auto-running, auto-rotating in the background on a TV. That often is plenty to be able to show off what the possibilities are. Again, can be very easily created by someone with the right skills. It's something. I'm actually going to be doing a conference here on the Central Coast in about 2 weeks, and I'll actually have a TV behind me with tours running, and I'll have several samples running, so that people will be able to see exactly what it looks like from a standard screen perspective.
Great. And we've actually seen it being done too at a trade show recently. I think it was National Parks New South Wales brought along their, amazing. It really was quite amazing. Their, but they had it set up. I don't know, Carolyn, did you do it? It was they had a great big sort of screen, and yeah, we all got to log on with our cameras, and I mean with our goggles and mobile phones. So it was really, really useful. It was great.
I did both that, and I was going to say when Tourism Australia launched their Coastal and Aquatic campaign, which was very heavily, I think was one of the first national tourist boards to use virtual reality in that way. Every single trade show for industry, both domestically and internationally, they were there. They had a team of people doing it. But both were fabulous creations. We particularly liked the Culture and Heritage one, not because we didn't love the TA one, obviously, because we love our local NTO. But I thought that it's sometimes very hard to engage young people with culture and heritage. And the Culture and Heritage headsets just really, it was really engaging a millennial audience in seeing stories come to life for them. So yeah, it was really, really great. Sorry, I was shouting at you, but I'm having some problems with my headphones, so that was why you couldn't hear me.
That's all right. Okay, we have another one here from Krista. Have you done any work for natural attractions, so camping and bushwalking, etc.?
I actually haven't done camping and bushwalking, but I actually have shot 360 photos for nice. For example, the Five Lands Walk. I took several images along that here on the Central Coast. Up, the closest thing I've come to that is actually a pet resort, to be honest with you, which is actually amazing because they've actually had 50,000 views because it's actually a pet resort that actually goes out onto a bushwalk. So we took a few images of that space outside inclusively so people could see if you're going to have your dog walk by these people, this is the space it's going to be in. But definitely it can be done. One of the things that's interesting about that is if you're in an area whereby you think that space ought to have a 360 virtual tour, Google Street View style, you can actually get or request from Google what's called the Google Trekker. And it's a backpack 360 camera. It's a very high-end commercial camera that you can actually get for free from Google to do these so-called non-paid spaces that, like would be a national park or a trail that's in a public space. So you can request that. Now you've got to actually then have someone who's prepared to wear the backpack camera and run it and then take all that imagery. So that's a bit of a challenge. It's not a light camera. It's pretty big camera, but it has been done in a lot of places already. The easiest way for you to see where it's already been done before you think, geez, I'd love to get this done, is go on to Google Maps. In fact, maybe what I'll do is I'll actually show you how you can see where you'll find where it's already been done. Let me just pop up Google
I just
Maps.
saw one. Yeah, there's one on Maps at the moment for Tunisia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually show the guy with the backpack.
Yep. Well, if
So
you click on
walking around.
If you click on the little peg man on the bottom right-hand corner, you'll notice all the blue that shows up on a screen. Now, here's an example of Booty National Park. This is actually a trail that's been shot using the Google Trekker. So I'm not sure exactly who did it, but somebody obviously thought it would be great to be able to do it. And what I'm about to show you now, this is shot with the Google Trekker, and this is on the trail. So a lot of places have already actually even been done. Okay, so before you ask for it, have a look on Google Maps to see if it's already been shot. The only reason why you may want to do it is if it's out of date, you may want to have it done again. Something's changed. By all means, you may request the Trekker once again. But all you need to do is to sign on and just look up. I think it's simply borrow the Trekker will probably give you that search result and be able to actually request that from Google. I don't know exactly how many they have here in Australia, but I know they have them all over the world.
Wow, there you go. Okay, here's another question. Hi, Nigel. If you already have a Google My Business virtual tour, how do you actually add it to Facebook? And I think you said, Mark, it was $30 a month. So how do you do that? Is it an app, or what process do you go through to upload it?
Okay, all right. It's actually only $30 per month if you also want it to show up on your Facebook page on mobile. Otherwise, it's free as long as you use a service called Woobox, W-O-O-B-O-X. Search it up, and what you're looking for, in fact, I can probably just as easy if I actually look it up and show it to you. I've actually got, so if you actually look at the Woo box, and we'll sign in over here, let's see if I've actually got one set up. You'll actually see what it looks like. Woo box is, they offer this as a free service as long as you don't have a campaign running. So let's see if, oh, I got to log into my Facebook page. And I'm going to bring this up.
Nigel's saying he's figured it out.
Figured it out? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I think it's probably not for other people.
Other people need to see it. Yeah.
The static tabs is where you want to go, Nigel. Make sure you use that. Okay. So now with the static tabs, what you want to make sure is that you look at how you're going to place it. And usually what I recommend is using an HTML fangate tab. Okay. That's the one that works the best. So, you know, when you actually create an HTML fangate tab, what it does is it'll give you the ability to put in the HTML code to actually show the virtual tour in there. So one of the places you can get your code for that, for the iframe, it won't give you auto rotation, by the way. It won't give you the menus. You won't get any of that unless you talk to a virtual tour photographer who can create that for you. But I'll show you where you can get that. If you go to Google Maps, let's just do a search for a business here. I'm going back and forth a million times. We'll actually show you where you actually get your link. Maps. Brand new search on Maps. And let's look up, for example, Sure Eye Care. They're a client of mine. Not in the tourism industry, but the process is still the same. When you actually see the imagery for the 360 tour, okay, you'll notice there's these three little dots that show up. So Nigel, what you want to do is you want to find those three little dots. And once you click on that, you click on Share or Embed Image. And that will allow you to embed by using the iframe code that shows up in this box. That's the coding you're looking for. That will give you a basic 360 capability or virtual tour capability inside of that Woo box, or even for that matter on your website. So don't forget to put this on your website too, folks. Really, really important. If you already got a virtual tour, put it on your website, please. Don't reuse this content. It's brilliant content.
Awesome.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it looks like it has. Okay, we've got a couple more. Joanne, how many photos and frames do you take for each VR location?
Yeah, that varies a lot. It can be, I'll give you an example of a little tiny virtual tour, probably the smallest virtual tour I've shot. Kellerman's Winery. Okay. Now, this particular winery, you'll see when you see the virtual tour, it's tiny. Their cellar door, this is one of the this is literally the very first virtual tour I ever shot. Okay. And there's one image outside, one to get it out off the veranda. And I'm just going to click in, and you got one on the inside. And that's it. So a tour of that size is like $350. That's as small as you're going to get. Okay? And the reason why it's that size is literally all I'm needing to do is navigate, and one of the things you'll notice with Google Tours, Google doesn't like you going through walls. They don't like you jumping over chairs or tables. So you need to have clear field of view. So if you wanted to, for example, calculate the approximate cost of what it would be for your business to have a virtual tour, is look for clear line of sight between each point, and that'll give you an idea of where you need to stand to put the tripod down to take the 360 photo. And my pricing is $350 for the first 3 images, and then after that it's $50 an image after that. So if you base it off the extra every $50 per image, you get a pretty good idea how much it'll cost. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea how you would actually figure out your pricing. I prefer, obviously, in all cases, to actually do a site inspection, because sometimes people think that they can get away with a lot less than they should, or sometimes they can get away with a lot less. I've actually had some people who thought, it's going to be $2,000-$3,000, and I turn around and tell them, oh, it's a $600 shoot. And they're going, really? Yeah, that's all it is. You know, it's a very simple shoot. So
great. It's such good value for money, and that's the thing. I mean, yeah, there's really, when you look at the stats of, you know, the interest that it's going to generate, it's a no-brainer. So I guess if your marketing budget is $500 for the year, I would definitely go for this. It's awesome. Now, we have one last question. Nelson, finally getting to you. Could you please talk about the main technologies and how they are talking to each other? So we've got Google, Samsung, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook. Each of them have their own standards. So how would you comment on that?
Okay. Yeah, it's a brilliant question, and it's probably one of the hardest ones to really clearly answer because the goalpost is constantly changing. The amount of reading and updating that I have to do it's a 7-day-a-week job just to stay on top. So whatever answer I give you now, it might be different tomorrow. Okay, so please take that into consideration. But really, there's one major standard that's required for all of the imagery to be able to show up. And it's a little bit of coding that shows up inside of the 360 content imagery. If you're a technical person, you'll probably know what an XML file is. And it's a little sidecar file that actually sits inside the imagery. And inside that image file, there's information that tells the viewers, such as Google Chrome or, because it's a viewer, really, it's just an image viewer, or Firefox or whatever browser you're using, that this particular content is 360 by nature, and therefore allows it to be played. So really what it comes down to is, are these other platforms, like for example, when you're dealing with Apple, you know, we're dealing with Safari. Do they have the capacity to show that content? Absolutely yes. They all do now. Where things are going though is really in terms of being able to actually host that content natively. For example, Apple Maps. You can put photos on your Apple Maps listing, but they're still photos. They haven't moved yet to 360. Bing Maps. You can put photos there too. Highly recommend you do that. But you can't do 360s yet. But one organization that actually has done it is Expedia. You can actually have 360 photos on your Expedia listing. So if you're an Expedia client and you want to have 360 photos showing up on your Expedia listing, by all means, get your virtual tour photographer, your local photographer, to shoot a virtual tour that's usable for Expedia. It is a little bit different than Google Street View, but again, they use a hosting engine that actually allows that 360 content to show up. So yeah, so it all comes down to whatever device you're using actually has the capacity to show the content, and virtually all devices today have that capability. I actually don't know of anything that's less, you know, if it's a computer that's more than 5 years old, maybe you'll have problems, but beyond that, I think it'll be fine.
Fantastic. Wow, that was amazing. We're sort of coming up to an hour now. Do we have any more questions? This is the last call for questions. So, look, any comments, Carolyn, that you have?
I suppose one that would be useful, I mean, we've talked about the overall statistics, Mark, of why this is important. It'd be, can you hear me? Can you confirm you can hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great. Great. Is what results some of the businesses that you've worked with have seen from doing this, I think would be a great one to talk about, because I think people always find it easy. We talk these big numbers in the abstract, and I can almost hear people kind of thinking, oh, my business is different, because we all like to think our businesses are unique, and somehow the rules of business and the rules of digital marketing don't really apply to us. So I wonder if you'd, obviously you can't name names, but if you could talk about some results that you've seen from some of your businesses in the difference it's made in terms of what they're doing, it would be great to have that real practical example for people.
Sure, absolutely. I'm more than happy to share two that come to mind right off the top of my mind. One is actually, it's a little seafood shop, a little tiny place, and I had shot it, and they were kind of reluctant when they got it done. They weren't sure who was going to do anything for them, and I went back to see him just to see how he was doing, and he says, Mark, he says, you know what? I have never been busier. ever since getting this tour. He says, I don't really know if it's this. He says, at that time, we didn't even have the stats on how many views were showing up. This is only, Google Street View Virtual Tour photo views has only been showing up in the past 2 weeks. It's that new. So in terms of stats, we're only getting into that space right now. So it is very difficult to actually judge exactly how do what the conversion rate is from a virtual tour. But you can actually put in Google Analytics on a custom virtual tour, which is a nice way to be able to measure that. But this particular fellow had said literally that he had seen a significant increase in his visitation to his little fish shop. I had another client who was a gift shop, and they actually told me that they were now getting phone calls from across the country to look at products that they had seen in the virtual tour, and they were getting online orders as a result. And in fact, as a result of that, they asked me, they said, Mark, do you know a web developer that we can talk to? Because I think we need to redevelop our website to make it an online shopping store as opposed to just a little bit about us. So they literally had to change their business model as a result of actually getting more views for their business on their virtual tour. So that's about the best they can give you in terms of actual stats. It's very difficult because there is no way of directly linking right now an actual view count to a booking engine to a because all of that is very new. Just the views, as I said, they're just starting to show up now. But if I scroll through, just to give you an idea, I don't know if I'd scroll a little bit lower down here. I can show you. Like, here's an image of this is Central Coast Motel, which I use as an example. 2,412 views. I shot that a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
I mean, even if it's not turning into bookings as of yet, that's still pretty impressive. This is a little restaurant in Terrigal. 219 views on that image, 246 views on that one. The numbers are quite fascinating. So definitely, you're looking at literally in the thousands of views for a lot of businesses. So,
and we know that Google does give preference unofficially. I mean, they don't say this, but we know through anecdotal evidence that, if you're putting up fabulous current recent content, including photos, videos, and virtual tours, there is an unofficial priority given to you because they are screaming right now for visuals in your Google My Business page. So, this is another way that you can actually get ahead of your competitors.
And I think to add to that, Bron, they're using it because Google's all about, are you a customer-focused business? This for them is a proxy of that. So that view that you just look after your customers when they arrive with you, and that shows you're a customer service, that view is dead. Who you are digitally now is who you really are. I think we need to add that. I'd like to add to that, Mark, another point that is very much a space I'm living in at the moment, which is I'm doing a lot of work in the area of accessible tourism, as is Bron. She's talking on this at ARTN in October. And one of the things that we hear a lot in that world is how important the very precise details of what you have to offer. So your Central Coast Motel example, for example, I was just thinking how awesome that would be for someone who, particularly not just people in wheelchairs, but people who are ambulant or have got cognitive difficulties, all of those things. This can be a real tool to get to one of the world's fastest growing tourism markets. And it's actually a really we're always hearing, oh, it costs me a lot to get into that world, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. This is a great way to show people so they can already make a judgment on what you've got. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
A good example of that actually is when I actually do the virtual tour shoot, what actually is a determinant of where I take my photos from is, in fact, to be able to demonstrate accessibility. That's actually a really important factor that I include in the process. So that if something is accessible by, for example, if there's an escalator, I will actually show that there's an escalator. I want to make sure I include that. If there's an elevator, I'm going to make sure that it's very visible. Those are the things that are really critical to be able to help people make those decisions. You're absolutely right. There's one other thing I'd like to share too, that, and this is, call it a little added bonus, and it's, It actually hasn't really taken off yet because it's still like everything in Google, everything's in beta. We all know that, right? You know, everything's a test. Okay,
yes, of
remember
course.
that, folks.
Yes.
It's always moving. They have just launched the ability to actually include as an additional piece of content videos on your Google business page. Did you know that? You can, if you're actually shooting, if you've got a small piece of video and you own an Android phone, you have to have an Android phone to do this with. You have to install Google Maps Beta, the beta version. It's the only way to get access to this. You can then upload up to 30-second videos back to a place on the map. Just launched.
Is that on the new posts feature, the new Google Posts?
Yes. Yes. So that's actually part of that. So yeah, so definitely that's another thing. So they've actually done huge advances on the Google My Business between adding posts, adding the ability to create a very, very basic website. It's not a beautiful website, but it's a website. It's a URL link. And the fact that the view counts are showing up now, the fact that videos are going to be showing up, they are going after the market wholeheartedly. So they are grand simplification.
Yeah, and it's a great way too. With Google Posts, they've just literally added this. You can add a post on your Google My Business page that will sort of be given priority in search, and they last for a week. So it's a great way to get if you've got any specials coming up or any last-minute deals. Yep, just grab your camera and just snap a short video with something to say. It's really awesome. So there's lots of tools there. All right, we might call it a wrap now.
Cool.
And is there anything else, Mark? Do you want to let us know if people want to contact you, the name of your business again?
Yes, sure. I'll just put it back up again. The name of the business is WorkPics, WorkPics.com.
Yep.
It's probably the easiest place to catch me. Email me, put a post up on Facebook, get a hold of me through LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. If you've got any questions, or even if you're looking for a photographer in your area that you'd like to have recommended from someone within the community, because that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is getting a trust relationship from someone that's already in this space. I actually have good relationships with photographers in Perth and Melbourne and Adelaide. Actually, I'm working with I've been training a photographer in Atlantic City recently in the U.S. So I've got a lot of good connections all over the world.
Right, and do you travel? Because people this has been an amazing presentation, and I'm sure there's people from all over Australia, even New South Wales. I know Joanne, you're up in northern New South Wales. People have been asking so many questions, and there's been so engaged. So if you travel, that's a good thing. They might just want Mark, and I can understand why they would want Mark.
Well, I'd also noticed on Facebook, Mark, that people have already been friending you or liking your page on Facebook, so I'd say that's probably a pretty good sign.
Yeah.
Gotta love that. Gotta love the love.
Hey? And we've got lots of people saying thank you. Nigel saying thank you. Joanne said thank you. Lots of people have commented on how fabulous this is. And I'm not just saying that, Mark, but this has been absolute gold in terms of content that you've given us today. So that's all good. All right, well, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody now. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And it's been a great webinar. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye all. Bye, everyone.
Bye.